Welcome to the Living Life Discourses on the Greatest Call channel, the global voice for expanding consciousness. But souls that of his own good life partake, he loves as his own self. Dear as his eye they are to him. He will never them forsake when they shall die. Then God himself shall die. They live in blessed eternity. And that is an epilogue written by Henry Moore. As previously articulated, we shall glean the best knowledge and narratives from these sages, saints, scientists, prophets, and poets for the singular purpose of expanding your consciousness, folks, and that of mine. There is a difference between one and another hour of life in their authority and subsequent effect. Our faith comes in moments, our vice habitual. Yet there is a depth in those brief moments which constrains us to ascribe more reality to them than to all other experiences. For this reason, the argument which is always forthcoming to silence those who conceive extraordinary hopes of man, namely the appeal to experience, is forever invalid and vain. We give up the past to the objector, and yet we hope. And yet we hope. He must explain this hope. We grant that human life is mean. But how did we find out that it was mean? What is the ground of this uneasiness of ours, of this old discontent? What is the universal sense of want and ignorance but the fine innuendo by which the soul makes it enormous claim? Why do men feel that the natural history of man has never been written, but he is always leaving behind what you have said of him, and it becomes old and books of metaphysics worthless? The philosophy of 6,000 years has not searched the chambers and magazines of the soul. Again, the philosophy of 6,000 years has not searched the chambers and magazines of the soul. In its experiments, there has always remained, in the last analysis, a residue it could not resolve. Man is a stream whose source is hidden. Again, man is a stream whose source is hidden. Our being is descending into us from we know not whence. Again, our being is descending into us from we know not whence. The most exact calculator has no prescience that somewhat incalculable may not balk the very next moment. I am constrained every moment to acknowledge a higher origin for events than the world I call mine. Than the world I call mine. As with events, so is it with thoughts. When I watch that flowing river, which out of regions I see not, pours for a season, it streams into me. I see that I am a pensioner, not a cause, but a surprised spectator of this ethereal water, that I desire and look up and put myself in the attitude of reception, but from some alien energy, the visions come. The supreme critic on the errors of the past and the present, and the only prophet of that which must be, is that great nature in which we rest. As the earth lies in the soft arms of the atmosphere, that unity, that oversoul, that unity, that oversoul, within which every man's particular being is contained and made one with all other, that common heart, of which all sincere conversation is the worship, to which all right action is submission, that overpowering reality which confutes our tricks and talents and constrains everyone to pass for what he is and to speak from his character and not from his tongue. Again, that overpowering reality which confutes our tricks and talents and constrains one to pass for what he is and to speak from his character and not from his tongue, and whichever more tends to pass into our thought and hand and become wisdom and virtue and power and beauty. We live in succession, in division, in parts, in particles. Meantime, within man is the soul of the whole. Again, meantime, within man is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty to which every part and particle is equally related. The eternal one. And this deep power in which we exist and whose beatitude is all accessible to us is not only self-sufficing and perfect in every hour, but the act of seeing and the thing seen. Again, the act of seeing and the thing seen, the seer and the spectacle, the subject and the object are one. We see the world piece by piece, as the sun, the moon, the animal, the tree, but the whole, again, but the whole of which these are the shining pot is the soul, is the soul. Only by the vision of that wisdom can the horoscope of the ages be read, and by falling back on our better thoughts, by yielding to the spirit of prophecy which is innate in every man, we can know what it saith. Every man's words who speaks from that life must sound vain to those who do not dwell in the same thoughts on their own part. I dare not speak for it. My words do not carry its august sense. They fall short and cold. Only itself can inspire whom it will, and behold, their speech shall be lyrical and sweet and universal as the rising of the wind. Yet I desire, even by profane words, if I may not use sacred, to indicate the heaven of this deity, and to report what hints I have collected of the transcendent simplicity and energy of the highest law, of the highest law. If we consider what happens in conversations, in reveries, in remorse, in times of passion, in surprises, in the instruction of dreams, where often we see ourselves in masquerades, the drawl disguises only magnifying and enhancing a real element and forcing it on our distinct notice. We shall catch many hints that will broaden and lighten into knowledge of the secret of nature. Into the knowledge of the secret of nature. Again, all this goes to show that the soul in man is not an organ. It's not, but animates and exercises all the organs. It's not a function like the power of memory, of calculation, of comparison, but uses these as hands and feet. It's not a faculty, but a light. It's not the intellect of the world, but the master, again, the master of the intellect and the world. Is the background of our being in which they lie. An immensity not possessed, and that cannot be possessed. From within or from behind, a light shines through us upon things and makes us aware that we are nothing. But the light is all. But the light is all. A man is the facade of a temple wherein all wisdom and all good abide. What we commonly call man, the eating, drinking, planning, counting man, does not, as we know him, represent himself, but misrepresents himself. Him we do not respect, but the soul, whose organ he is. Would he let it appear through his action, would make our knees bend. When it breathes through his intellect, it is genius. When it breathes through his will, it is value. When it flows through his affection, it is love. And the blindness of the intellect begins when it would be something of itself. The weakness of the world begins when the individual would be something of himself. All reform aims in someone particular to let the soul have its way through us. In other words, to engage us to obey. To engage us to obey. Of this pure nature, every man is at some time sensible. Language cannot paint it with his colors. It is too subtle. It is undefinable, unmeasurable. But we know that it pervades and contains us. We know that all spiritual being is in man. A wise old proverb says, God comes to see us without bell. Again, a wise old proverb goes or says, God comes to see us without bell. That is, as there is no screen or ceiling between our heads and the infinite heavens, so is there no bar or wall in the soul where man, the effect ceases, and God, the cause, begins. The walls are taken away. We lie open on one side to the deep of spiritual nature, to the attributes of God. Justice we see and know, love, freedom, power, love, freedom, and power. These natures no man ever got above, but they tower over us, and most in the moment when our interests tempt us to wound them. The sovereignty of this nature whereof we speak is made known by its independency of those limitations which circumscribe us on every hand. The soul circumscribes all things. As I have said, it contradicts all experiences. In like manner, it abolishes time and space. Again, the soul circumscribes all things. As I have said, it contradicts all experiences. In like manner, it abolishes time and space. The influence of the senses has, in most men, overpowered the mind to that degree that the walls of time and space have come to look real and insurmountable. And to speak with levity of these limits is, in the world, the sign of insanity. Yet time and space are but inverse measures of the force of the soul. The spirit sports with time, can crowd eternity into an hour or stretch an hour into eternity. We are often made to feel that there is another youth and age than that which is measured from the year of our natural birth. Some thoughts always find us young and keep us so. Such a thought is the love of the universal and eternal beauty. Every man parts from that contemplation with the feeling that it rather belongs to ages than to mortal life. The least activity of the intellectual powers redeems us in a degree from the conditions of time. In sickness, in languor, gave us a strain of poetry or a profound sentence, and we are refreshed, or produced a volume of Plato or Shakespeare, or remind us of their names, and instantly we come into a feeling of longevity. See how the deep divine thought reduces centuries and millenniums and makes itself present through all ages. Is the teaching of Christ less effective now than it was when first his mouth was opened? The emphasis of the fact and persons in my thought has nothing to do with me, has nothing to do with time. And so, always, the soul's scale is one, the scale of the senses, and the understanding is another. And before the revelations of the soul, time, space, and nature shrink away. In common speech, we refer all things to time, as we habitually refer the immensely sundered stars to one concave sphere. And so we say that the judgment is distant or near, that the millennium approaches, that a day of certain political, moral, social reforms is at hand, and the like, when we mean that in the nature of things, one of the facts we contemplate is external and fugitive, and the other is permanent and connected with the soul. The things we now esteem fixed shall, one by one, detach themselves, like ripe fruit from our experience, and fall. As previously articulated, we shall glean the best knowledge and narratives from every corner, every discipline, for the singular goal of expanding your consciousness, my consciousness. The wind shall blow them, none knows whither. The landscape, the figures, Boston, London, are facts as fugitive as any institution post, or any wave of mist or smoke. And so is society, and so is the world. The soul looketh steadily forwards, creating a world before her, living worlds behind her. She has no date, no right, no persons, no specialities, no man. Again, the wind shall blow them, none knows whither. The landscape, the figures, Boston, London, are facts as fugitive as any institution past, or any wave of mist or smoke. And so is society, and so is the world. The soul looketh steadily forward, creating a world before her, living worlds behind her. She has no date, nor right, nor persons, nor specialties, nor man. The soul knows only the soul. The web of events is the flowing robe in which she is clothed. The web of events is the flowing robe in which she is clothed. After its own law, and not by arithmetic, is the rate of its progress to be computed. The soul's advances are not made by gradation, such as can be represented by motion in a straight line. No, but rather by ascension of state, such as can be represented by metamorphosis, from the egg to the worm, from the worm to the fly. The growth of a genius are of a certain total character that does not advance the elect individual first over John, then Adam, then Richard, and give to each the pain of discovered inferiority. No, but by every throw of growth, the man expands there where he works, passing at each position classes, populations of men. And with each divine impulse, the mind rends the thin reins of the visible and finite, and comes out into eternity, and inspires and expires its earth. It converses with truths that have always been spoken in the world, and becomes conscious of a closer sympathy with Zeno and Arian than with persons in the house. This is the law of moral and of mental gain. The simple rise as by specific levity, not into a particular value, but into the region of all the values. They are in the spirit which contains them all. The soul requires purity, but purity is not it. Requires justice, but justice is not that. Requires beneficence, but is somewhat better, so that there is a kind of dissent and accommodation felt when we live. Speaking of moral nature, to urge a value which it enjoys. To the well-born child, all the values are natural and not painfully acquired. Speak to his heart, and the man becomes suddenly virtuous. Within the same sentiment is the germ of intellectual growth, which obeys the same law. Those who are capable of humility, of justice, of love, of aspiration, stand already on a platform that commands the sciences and arts, speech and poetry, action and grace. For whoso dwells in this moral beatitude already anticipate those special powers which men prize so highly. Again, for whoso dwells in this moral beatitude already anticipate those special powers which men prize so highly. The lover has no talent, no skill, which passes for quiet nothing with his enamored maiden. However, little she may possess of related faculty, and the heart which abandons itself to the supreme mind finds itself related to all its works and will travel a royal road to particular knowledges and powers. In ascending to this primary and aboriginal sentiment, we have come from our remote station on this circumference instantaneously to the center of the world, whereas in the closest of God we see causes and anticipate the universe, which is but a slow effect. One mode of the divine teaching is the incarnation of the Spirit in a form. In forms like my own, I live in society with persons who answer to thoughts in my own mind or express a certain obedience to the great instinct to which I live. I see its presence to them. I am certified of a common nature, and these other souls, these separated selves, draw me as nothing else can. They stir in me the new emotions we call passion, of love, hatred, fear, admiration, pity. Thence comes conversation, competitions, persuasion, cities, and war. Persons are supplementary to the primary teachings of the soul. In youth, we are mad for persons. Childhood and youth see all the world in them. But the larger experience of man discovers the identical nature appearing through them all. Persons themselves acquaint us with the impersonal in all conversation between two persons. Tacit reference is made as to a third party, to a common nature. That third party or common nature is not social, it is impersonal, it's God. And so in groups where debate is earnest, and especially on the high questions, the company become aware that the thought rises to an equal level in all bosoms that are all having a spiritual property in what was said, as well as the sayer. They all become wiser than they were. It arches over them like a temple. This unity of thought in which every heart beats with nobler sense of power and duty, and thinks and acts with unusual solemnity. All are conscious of attaining to a higher self-possession. It shines for all. There is a certain wisdom of humanity which is common to the greatest men with the lowest, and which our ordinary education often labors to silence and obstruct. The mind is one, and the best minds who love truth for its own sake think much less of property in truth. They accept it thankfully everywhere and do not label or stamp it with any man's name, for it is theirs long beforehand. and from eternity. The learned and the studious of thought have no monopoly of wisdom. Their violence of direction in some degree disqualifies them to think truly. We owe valuable observations to people who are not very acute or profound and who say the thing without effort, which we want and have long been hunting in vain. The action of the soul is oftener in that which is felt and left unsaid than in that which is said in any conversation. It brews over every society, and they unconsciously seek for it in each other. And they unconsciously seek for it in each other. We know better than we do. We do not yet possess ourselves, and we know at the same time that we are much more. I feel the same truth how often in my trivial conversation with my neighbors that somewhat higher in each of us overlooks this byplay and journals to jump from behind each of us. Men descend to meet in their habitual and mean service to the world, for which they forsake their native nobleness. They resemble those Arabian sheikhs who dwell in mean houses and affect an eternal poverty to escape the rapacity of the poacher and reserve all their display of wealth for their interior and guarded retirement. As it is present in all persons, so it is in every period of life. It is adult already in the infant man. In my dealing with my child, my Latin and Greek, my accomplishment and my money stead me nothing, but as much soul as I have avails. If I am willful, he set his will against mine, one for one, and leaves me, if I please, the degradation of beating him by my superiority of strength. But if I renounce my will and act for the soul, setting that up as umpire between us two, out of his young eyes look the same soul he reveres and loves with me. He reveres and loves with me. The soul is the perceiver and revealer of truth. Again, the soul is the perceiver and revealer of truth. We know truth when we see it. Let skeptic and scoffers say what they choose. Foolish people ask you, when you have spoken, what they do not wish to hear. How do you know it is truth and not an error of your own? And we know truth when we see it. From opinion, as we know when we are awake, that we are awake. It was a grand sentence of Emanuel Swedenborg, which would alone indicate the greatness of that man's perception. It is no proof of a man's understanding to be able to confirm whatever he pleases, but to be able to discern that what is true, and that what is false is false. This is the mark and character of intelligence. The mark and character of intelligence. In the book I read, the good thought returns to me, as every truth will, the image of the whole soul. To the bad thought which I find in it, the same soul becomes a discerning, separating sword and loops it away. We are wiser than we know if we will not interfere with our thoughts, but will act entirely or see how the thing stands in God. We know the particular thing and everything and every man. For the maker of all things and all persons stands behind us and casts his dread omniscience through us over things. But beyond this recognition of its own in particular passages of the individual's experience, it also reveals truth. And here, we should seek to reinforce ourselves by its very presence and to speak with a worthier, loftier strain of that advent. For the soul's communication of truth is the highest event in nature, since it then does not give some word from itself, but it gives itself, passes into and becomes that man whom it enlightens, or in proportion to that truth he receives, it takes him to itself. Folks, your soul, my soul, is never local. It's transcendent. It is the overall pervasive substance of the universe. The reason, whatever we want, should we ensoul it with prayer, affirmation, visualization, which shall concretize our beliefs. And as the son of Nazareth said, whatever you pray or ask, believe that ye had already received it, and it shall be yours. Once all the work is done and belief is solid, it must come by sometimes few people helping others, other times thousands and millions, if not billions, all helping unknowingly to you, to me, achieving our goals. Why? Because it's all one indivisible consciousness or oversoul. The above were excerpts from one of the best essays on the planet on the oversoul, the universal soul, i.e., the universal ultimate consciousness, written by no other but one of the greatest transcendentalists of all time, Ralph Waldo Emerson. God bless you, your family, and the planet. We shall definitely see you all very soon.